She parked at Bodega Head for a quick hike, then vanished. Weeks later, her car still cold. A cassette appears, "Don't follow." In the caves, voices answer back, and something below the tide breathes. A witness disappears. The ocean keeps time, 3.2 seconds. What is the headland listening for, and who will it take next? Like, subscribe, and don't look away as we unravel the stories hidden in the shadows. She arrived just after midday, rolling down the windows to sip in the coastal air as she wound her car along Highway 1. Sunshine Borjas, she thought perhaps the name portended what she sought. A pause, a moment outside the rush of life in Santa Rosa. It was early October, and the chill fog was already trying to creep in from the sea. She parked at the small lot beside the Bodega Head Overlook. The signpost welcomed tourists to Bodega Head Trail, promising a loop path with sweeping ocean views. The cliffs, the crashing waves, the gulls wheeling overhead. She'd done simpler hikes, shorter walks closer to home, but today she wanted more: solitude, thought, perspective. Her vehicle, a white compact SUV, sat waiting, engine cooled, keys still in the cup holder. She left a water bottle and a light snack on the front seat, and stepped out wearing gray athletic gear and black sneakers. No one saw her after she crossed the threshold of the trail. The path forked quickly. One direction hugged the bluff's edge, the other dropped slightly inland along windswept wild grasses. The fog was thin now, but in patches you could already see how it might drift in and swallow the vista in mist. At first the trail was benign. A few bird calls, the hiss of surf against rock folds. She paused at one overlook point, dropped to a boulder's edge, unfastened her pack, and looked out over the boundary between sea and sky. She would have checked her phone. No signal, but perhaps scrolled through a map or traced her intended route. She may have scribbled something in a little notebook she carried, or taken a breath as the wind tugged at her hair. A gull cried. A puff of fog drifted upward from the cliffs. And then she was gone. That evening, as her car remained unattended in the Bodega Head parking area, alarm flickered in her family's minds. She hadn't returned. They called the local police. By dawn, search teams from the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office and Santa Rosa Police had joined, along with Coast Guard patrols along the coastline. But they faced a formidable adversary. Dense fog that grounded drones and helicopters, obscured cliffs, and swallowed voices in the wind. They searched the loops, the bluffs, the narrower gullies, using teams of volunteers and canine units. The waves deep below churned in oblivion. Reports of glimpsed figures, odd footprints, unsettled stones, all turned cold. No trace of her. Her car remained untouched, save for the documents she had with her. They found no phone signal attempts, no emergency calls out. It was as if she had stepped off the map. In the days that followed, theories rippled through local news and forums. Did she slip and fall over one of the precipitous edges, swallowed by darkness and surf? Had she perhaps wandered off the formal trail, into crevices or caves known only to local wildlife trackers? Could she have encountered someone else, another hiker, a stranger, who led her off route? Or perhaps was there something less earthly at work? They said the Sonoma coast has its legends. Voices in the fog, uncanny disappearances of hikers through the years. One volunteer in the search wrote late at night, "I swear I heard her calling or thought I did, but the fog distorted everything." Another claimed a glimpse of a silver jacket in the fog, vanished when approached. The sheriff's office issued a cautious hope. They would not cease the search, but they admitted time was their enemy. Over the weeks, the media picked up the story. She was 47 years old, blonde hair, blue eyes, described in gray hike wear and black shoes. Her car had been parked the entire night. No signs of struggle. The trail she intended, called by some a relatively easy loop of 1 to 3 miles. Some locals recalled past tales. Decades ago in that same coastal region, hikers had vanished inexplicably, never found. Others murmured of hidden caves beneath the bluffs, eroded tunnels, sea caves only accessible at low tide. The ocean, they said, was patient and jealous. Her family held a vigil. They drove out to the parking lot, stood at the overlook, watching waves break across the rocks. The authorities left posters along roadways: Sunshine Borjas, missing hiker. Last seen October 1st at Bodega Head. The silence stretched. Months passed. One autumn morning, the county received a tip. A coastal drift net operator claimed to have recovered a small, sealed bag entitled detritus containing a scrap of gray fabric matching her hike shirt, and a scrap of notebook paper with handwriting. If authentic, this would mark her presence near the waves. A dive team was dispatched to a submerged cavern near the cliff's base, where legend said the sea had breached the bluffs. Low tide and sonar scans found a narrow passage undercut by wave action. But visibility was nearly zero, silt stirred, and the team aborted after spotting only broken rock, algae, and no sign of human remains. The fragment of writing, delivered anonymously to the sheriff, was partial. Meet at high? Don't trust the... It was inconclusive, possibly forged, possibly genuine. Still, for her family it renewed hope. Could she have walked into that cave? Or had she flagged someone and ventured with them? Or perhaps everything was a coincidence. In the end, the mystery remains unresolved. The parking lot at Bodega Head is quiet again, save for visitors pausing to watch the surf, oblivious to the memory of the woman who never returned. Local hikers whisper, for months afterward, "Don't stray off the bluff in fog," cautioning each other. Her name remains on missing persons lists, her case in open file. The ocean continues its rhythms. The fog drifts in at dawn and fades by noon. The cliffs stand iron gray, the gulls circle, and the sea does not reveal its secrets lightly. Sunshine Borjas, in the telling, became a symbol of the edge between land and sea, of human vulnerability in wild places, and of how quickly a routine outing can turn into an enduring riddle. The sea had calmed by the third week after Sunshine's disappearance. The Coast Guard had scaled back their daily patrols, and the volunteers who once combed the dunes were back at their jobs. But Detective Ray Mendoza couldn't let it go. He'd worked missing person cases for over a decade, and in his experience, most trails led somewhere. An argument, a witness, a footprint, a call. Sunshine's case had none of those. No confrontation. No phone pings. No GPS trace. Just fog and a car parked by an overlook. He returned to Bodega Head on a gray morning, when the sky pressed low and the waves rolled in with slow authority. The air smelled of salt and something metallic. He climbed the bluff with a handheld recorder, documenting the terrain. Overlook, Western Ridge, no railings. Drop off approximately 80 feet. Wind consistent. Visibility, he paused, squinting toward the waterline, 10%. That's when he saw it. At the edge of a gully, a narrow fissure hidden by wild grass, was a shoe print. It was faint, softened by mist and time, but the tread pattern looked recent. He photographed it, then traced the path downhill. The soil was damp but not slippery. It led toward the lower trail where fog pooled like breath on glass. Halfway down he stopped. The wind carried a strange echo, something rhythmic, not quite the ocean's voice. A hollow reverberation that faded, returned, then stopped entirely. He followed the sound. Back at the sheriff's office, Deputy Carla Fensky reviewed body cam footage from the first days of the search. At timestamp 4 hours 17 minutes and 32 seconds, one of the volunteers, a man in a neon vest, looked toward the fog and said, "There. Do you hear that?" Then static. The sound vanished. When she slowed it down, she swore she could make out a faint woman's voice layered beneath the wind. She isolated the clip, increased gain and replayed it. 3 syllables emerged, distorted but undeniable. "Don't follow?" Carla leaned back. It might have been a trick of wind against rock. Or something else. She forwarded the file to Mendoza. That night, he replayed it in his motel room, headphones on, rain tapping against the window. "Don't follow." He couldn't tell if it was warning or invitation. He opened Sunshine's case file again. The witness reports all circled the same 4-hour window between 12:45 p.m. and 4:30 p.m. when she was last seen entering the trail. One witness, an older couple parked near the lot, mentioned a man with a tripod walking in the same direction shortly before her. They assumed he was a photographer. No one ever identified him. By Friday, Mendoza returned to the site with a small team. The tide was low and the lower caves were exposed. Locals called one of them the echo chamber, a wave-cut hollow that filled with booming sound when surf struck it just right. They climbed down cautiously, boots slick with algae. The entrance smelled of seaweed and rot. Inside, flashlight beams skittered across jagged stone and dripping stalactites. "Ma'am?" Mendoza called, voice echoing in rhythmic bursts. "Sunshine?" The air was heavy, the sound thick. Then Officer Kim found something, a scrap of gray fabric wedged between rocks. The same shade described in her last known clothing. It was salt-stiff but intact. "Bag it," Mendoza said. Deeper inside, the cave narrowed into a tunnel, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. On the wall, someone had etched a mark, 2 intersecting lines, a symbol that looked almost like a ladder. "Kids?" Kim asked. "Graffiti?" Mendoza's flashlight lingered on it. The same ladder symbol had been mentioned once in an older case file, one from 1998, when 2 hikers went missing near Jenner Beach, less than 20 miles north. Their last photo had shown a similar mark scratched into a driftwood beam. The file had gone cold. He reached for his phone, snapped a picture, and stepped closer. That's when his radio crackled. "Detective? You copy?" Carla's voice, urgent. "I'm here," he said, eyeing the passage. "We just got a call from Santa Rosa PD," she said. "Someone left an anonymous envelope at the front desk. Inside was a cassette tape labeled, Overlook, October 1st. They swear it's her handwriting." By midnight, the tape was playing in the evidence room. A soft hiss filled the speakers, followed by Sunshine's voice, steady, close, recorded outdoors. "If someone finds this, it means I didn't make it back," she said. "There's something here beneath the cliffs. It's not what people think." I heard voices. Not just echoes, real ones. They sound like they're coming from below the waterline. I followed them, but... Her breathing quickened. Wind howled through the mic. "If anyone else hears it, don't follow." The tape clicked, stopped. Mendoza rewound it twice. Each time, the end of the recording seemed to stretch, as though the final seconds weren't silence at all but a low, distant hum, like metal dragging underwater. He rubbed his eyes. "We'll run spectral analysis," he told Carla, but his voice betrayed unease. Outside, fog was rolling over the parking lot again. And from the corridor where the evidence room met the stairwell, someone had left muddy footprints, fresh, narrow, and leading straight toward the exit. Fog crept over the parking lot in a single slow-breathing sheet, as if the headland itself were exhaling. Detective Ray Mendoza stood with his palm on the hood of the white compact SUV, Sunshine's car, and felt how the metal kept a nighttime chill even after the weak noon sun had made a gesture at warming it. He didn't come for the car, not really. He came because this was the last fixed thing in her story, the last object that admitted she had been here. Doors locked, snack on the seat, water half drunk, the glove box slightly askew as if she'd opened it, and then decided against whatever was inside. The ordinary always carried the weight of what was missing. Around him, families took photographs facing the ocean, their hair pulled by wind, their voices clear for only a second before the fog absorbed them. He turned toward the trailhead and tried to hear what she might have heard. The long roll of surf, the gulls' skitter, the applause of grass against itself. Somewhere below was the cave the locals called the echo chamber, where they had found the ladder glyph scratched into the wall and a stiff scrap of gray fabric. Somewhere, too, was the narrow passage that a smaller person might have fit through. He was not small, he was stubborn. Stubbornness had gotten him this far. "You're alone?" A voice, female, cut through the fog. It was Deputy Carla Fensky, materializing out of it like a person stepping through a curtain. "If you slip, I'll have to write a report about how my boss does not respect gravity." "I respect it exactly enough," Mendoza said. "You got the analysis?" She held up a small Pelican case. Inside, a tablet blinked with the waveform of Sunshine's cassette and a second file. The body cam clip from those first fog-drowned days. "We ran spectral on both," she said, walking with him toward the bluff path. "It's not just wind and water. There's a mechanical signature in the low band, like a motor with an unbalanced load. And a very faint echo at a precise interval, about 3.2 seconds. That's not random surf. That's a cavity with a known geometry. We modeled the headland sea caves against the interval. Only 3 known hollows would produce that. The echo chamber is one. The other 2 aren't on any tourist map. The man with the tripod would know where they are," Mendoza said. Carla nodded, cheeks pinking from the cold. "I sent that still from the older couple, the silhouette shot, to local shops. A gallery owner in Sebastopol thinks the tripod is a Gitzo Series 3. That's what a lot of field recordists use." "Field recordists," he said, tasting the phrase. "Sound artists, bioacoustics folks, birders with more money than sense. People who record things you didn't know you could hear." She paused, then added, "Our anonymous cassette donor dropped a second envelope at Santa Rosa PD this morning. No tape this time. A map." They stopped. He took it from her, a hand-drawn coast outline, tide marks, 3 X's. The X at Bodega Head was annotated with a small ladder glyph, like the one carved into the cave. Another X pointed north toward a less accessible part of the coast. The third was inland, scrawled between ridgelines with no obvious path. "Someone is leading us," he said. "Or someone is daring us," she replied. They took the lower path where fog pooled in the dips, passing a wooden bench with engraved names of donors that had loved the view. The ocean from here was not a postcard but a machine, moving water against rock in the endless same way. The trail slanted down and for a moment, they could see the slick crescent mouth of the echo chamber below, its throat sucking and sighing. A man in a rain shell stood near the lip, peering through binoculars. When he lowered them, he folded them into his jacket in a practiced motion. "Hey," Mendoza called, holding up his badge. "Sonoma Sheriff." The man didn't run. He did something more unnerving. He smiled, small and tidy. "Detective," he said in a tone that knew the word as a noun and a character type. "You must be Mendoza." "That's a funny guess." "Not a guess." He tapped his temple. "I listen to scanner feeds. You're a voice I've heard." Carla was already writing down the make of the binoculars, the way his boots cut the mud. The man had a clean-shaven, stubborn chin and eyes that tried not to look like they were measuring things. A tripod case leaned against a boulder as casual as a loaf of bread. "Name?" Mendoza asked. "Evan," he said. "Evan Kearney." "Kearney," Carla repeated as if trying the weight of the letters. "Local." "Local enough," he said. "I do residency programs in the Bay, record sounds on the coast, teach a workshop about listening. The headland is a cathedral for echo. You can hear migration routes if you know when to wait." "Migration routes," Mendoza said. "Whales," Evan said almost gently as if coaxing them into his world. "You can hear the pressure waves long before a dorsal breaks. The metal you hear sometimes is winch cable from the crabbers." Carla positioned herself so that the tripod case was between them and the ocean. "You were out here on October 1st. "I was," he admitted. "Never saw her. I saw her car. Everyone saw her car. But the fog turned the world into a coin flip that day. You didn't see her going in. You didn't see her coming out." "Sometimes," he said, and said it not like a defense but like a difficult truth, "there is a person and the fog takes them and the fog will not give me what it took." Mendoza pointed at the cave mouth. "You know the other two hollows that would produce a 3.2-second echo?" Evan's smile turned, just barely, into something like respect. "You brought measured time to the cliff," he said. "That's rare." "Yes, I know one. The northern one is a hazard. The ledge crumbles. The inland one is not a cave at all. It's an old maintenance shaft." "Maintenance," Carla echoed. "For what?" Evan looked at the map in Mendoza's hand and blinked like a man who had only just realized he was not alone with his secrets. He glanced at the tripod, at the waves. "There's a reason the cliffs sound the way they do," he said. "You're hearing wind, water, and stone, but you're also hearing air drawn through something made by people. A pipe. A network of them, actually. The headland was part of a radar experiment in the 50s. They dug service shafts for cables and left the vents. The pipes are why a dead calm can whistle like a kettle. Someone who knew where those vents are could amplify what the headland already does." "Amplify," Mendoza repeated. On the cassette, Sunshine had said, "If anyone hears it, don't follow. You teach people to listen. Did you teach someone to build a voice?" Evan folded his arms, hugging himself against a gust. "I teach a workshop. 12 people. I don't run background checks. I show them how to set a mic out of the wind and how to hear the distance. If there's a lunatic in my alumni, I don't have a roster that lists, lures hikers to their deaths." "Give us the names anyway," Carla said. He winced. "I'll give you what I can. One of them creeped me out after the second session. He wasn't listening to the world. He was listening for people. He always had questions about voices and fog, about how far sound travels, about whether a human could be convinced that a voice was inside a cave when it was actually..." He stopped. "I didn't get his last name. He paid cash. He said people called him Crane." "Like the bird?" Mendoza said. "Like the machine," Evan corrected softly, and the low band of the surf thudded as if punctuating the difference. They took Evan's statement and his business card. After he left, Carla said, "Crane, tripod, winch cables, ladders. Our case is building its own construction site." Mendoza looked at the map again. "Let's find the Inland X." The Inland X turned out to be a place where the coastal shrubs thinned into scrub oak and then to an old chain-link fence around a depression. The fence had once held a caution sign. The sign hung crooked, rusted into unreadability. The gate was looped shut with baling wire, which meant it had been opened by someone who liked improvisation and privacy. Beyond it, the depression had the wrong geometry to be natural. Stone rectangles described the top of a shaft covered by a steel plate, half buried by years of dirt washed toward it in storms. The ground was stitched with the dry tendrils of wild cucumber vines and plastic candy wrappers from hikers who had tossed and forgotten. Carla crouched and brushed away dirt from the edge of the plate. Her glove scraped rust. "Vent," she said, peering into cracks. "You can feel the draft." Mendoza put his palm over the seam and felt it, a cool breath like the inside of a mouth. The air smelled faintly of old metal and a memory of electricity. He bent his head to listen, and there it was. Not the ocean but the pause between pressure changes, a quiet throb. "Someone opens this," he said. "Someone small," Carla added, looking at the way the dirt was displaced. "Or someone patient." They worked methodically, photographing, gloving, trying the wire, documenting everything a defense attorney would later contest. When they eased the plate, only enough to peer, he saw a brick and a welded ladder descending into a dark square shaft. The ladder had been painted white once, long ago. Only a few flecks remained, like chalk on bone. In the first 3 rungs, there were scuffs and a smear of something darker. He angled his flashlight and the light came back filled with air, dust, motes of time. About 6 feet down, the shaft opened into a horizontal conduit, a man-sized crawl with cables long removed and only their rust-colored ghosts on the anchors. Carla coughed. "I hate holes," she said almost as a prayer. "Me too," he said. He had not told her that in the years before the badge he had worked construction and once spent an entire day in a pit shoring up a pipe while a backhoe chattered overhead. He had felt then, as he felt now, the specific way the planet holds you when you move into it. They called for cover units and a gear wagon. When the deputies arrived with harnesses and gas monitors and the kind of lights that made holes think twice, he insisted on going. "I won't have a deputy down there without me," he said, which was true but not complete. He also wanted his eyes, which were his own worst proof and his only compass. The shaft ran toward the ocean. 30 feet in, the crawl opened into a low gallery where 3 vents rose toward earth like organ pipes. One vent had fresh wear around its base. A length of paracord lay against the wall, coiled, its cut end heat fused to keep it from fraying. Opposite, an alcove held the remnants of someone's attention. A lantern, empty water bottles, a field notebook in a Ziploc bag. The notebook's top page held a quick sketch of the headland and under it 4 words, "They call to responders." The "they" was underlined twice. "Responders," Carla said, letting the syllables flatten. "People like us. People who run toward." Mendoza flipped another page. Tides, times, notes about fog thickness measured against landmarks. A drawing of the echo chamber mouth, the annotation, "Place speaker here but run cable through vent. Hide generator upstream." He tried to imagine the sound of a voice in fog you thought was a woman. He tried to imagine the voice was a man's, coming through a pipe in a bent metal curve and bouncing off rock to be handed back to you as if born there. He tried to imagine the person who had drawn these notes and whether they had a face he had seen. "Listen," he said. They turned off their lights. For a moment, the world was not sight but temperature and a sense of volume. Somewhere far along the conduit there was the faintest sound, like a bottle struck once and then listened to while it remembered. He wanted to say it was water. He wanted to say it was a generator trying to start. It stopped. It did not fail so much as decide it had done enough. They restored light and took the notebook and photographed every page. The last one had a list. October 1st, OK fog. 2 too clear. Don't. 3 windy. Mask audio. 4 full. Bring rope. 5 noise. New vent. 6 saw tripod. He sees me. He flipped the page and there was a single drawing of a ladder, more detailed than the cave glyphs, complete with rung spacing and then an arrow not of directions but of emphasis, pointing to a notation, "Rungs slick. Add resin." "Who adds resin to ladder rungs?" Carla whispered and no one answered. Their extraction of the notebook and the lantern and the paracord was old-fashioned police work done with care. When they emerged into gray light, the fog had thinned and there were shadows on the ground and a gull sat on the wire like punctuation. Evan Kearney was nowhere to be seen. The parking lot glinted. Somewhere the world still had schedules. Back at the office, a name came back from a partial that they had pulled days earlier and had only half believed would help. A hardware store receipt from a shop in Guerneville, found in a wind snag near the lower trail. It was soggy, numbers blurred, but forensics had coaxed out resin, anti-slip, paracord, 100 feet, and the last name C. Crane written with a shaky signature stamp. "Credit?" Mendoza asked. "Cash," the analyst said. "But they run their rewards program like it's still 2008. He gave them a phone number for the points. They dialed the number and got the resurrection of an old voicemail box. The greeting was a default female voice the telephone company had married to countless unknowns. They traced the number to a P.O. box in Forestville. The P.O. box to a rental where the owner had long since given up forwarding mail. A neighbor remembered a quiet man with a way of watching from behind his glasses, about 50, who drove a dented silver Tacoma with a ladder rack and kept company with no one. "What's the address?" Carla asked, and their boots were on as the printer spit out maps. Crane's rental was the sort of bungalow that hadn't been able to decide whether to be charming or easy. Weeds had already started the process of turning it back into land. The porch boards had been softened by neglect and salt air from the coast. On the door frame was a smear of resin. On the porch, a circular indentation where a 5-gallon bucket had sat long enough to cut its shape into the wood. A neighbor's cat threaded their legs and then lost interest. They knocked. Then they knocked again with the knowledge of a warrant on the way but the need to act. A wind chime made from cut pipe sections clinked, each pipe tuned not to a chord but to a scale that made the back of the neck pay attention. Carla, who never talked about the church choir she'd sung in as a kid, grimaced. When they entered, they found the customary emptiness of a sudden leaving. A couch was there. A bed was there. But the private shape of a life, the way a man leaves a book halfway done on a table or a coffee cup with a ring of his mouth, was missing. The kitchen smelled faintly of solder and rope and something like burned dust. In the garage, beneath shelves lined with oily tuna cans and batteries, they found the real residence. Coils of paracord, resin tins, a spool of speaker wire, a portable generator with scuffs on one foot, like a limp in a machine, and 3 tripod legs leaning in a corner like a tripod had been, at one point, a person. A calendar on the wall had dates circled not for holidays but for -low tide. In the corner, a box of cassettes. They stood in a half circle as if around a grave. Carla gloved and lifted one cassette. In neat block letters, October 1st, Overlook. The S had been written without flourish, and now that she saw it, she recognized the same hand that had labeled the tape left at Santa Rosa PD. Crane had Sunshine's voice. He had packaged it and mailed it back into the story as if to say, "See what I did? Let's not contaminate," Mendoza said. "Let's take the lot." They did not see the second layer until they dismantled the metal shelves. Behind them, bolted to the studs, a steel locker with a padlock. The padlock had been painted to look old and therefore was new. When the warrant arrived, they used a wheel to cut it, and the locker opened to show a backpack that looked like it could have belonged to any hiker on any day. In a side pocket was a driver's license with a photograph of a smiling woman with blonde hair and the name Sunshine Borjas. Everyone went very quiet. "Don't," Carla said. "Don't make noise." The backpack held a water bottle with fingerprints and sweat salt no one would be able to read, a snack bar with a bite that forensics might coax something from, and a small notebook. The notebook was not the Ziploc scribbler from the shaft. It was Sunshine's. Her handwriting tilted right like a person leaning into weather. The last entry: "If I can get back out, I'll tell the ranger what I saw so they can close this part. It's not only a cave. The voice is not a person calling. I think it's a recording. Who plays it? Why?" On the inner back cover she had written a phone number and the single word, Evan. Mendoza pressed his thumb against a spray of dust on the locker door and left a clean oval. "He told us he didn't know her," Carla said quietly. "Knowing and knowing are not the same," he said. "He knew of her, maybe. Or he found her name after. She wrote his." After an afternoon of the particular hell that is cross-checking forgeries and handwriting and the way the clock works in a place where the person you are trying to find is a memory with teeth, they sat in the squad room and looked at a whiteboard with too much and not enough. Crane. Evan. Sunshine's notebook. The pipes. The shaft. The echo chamber. The ladder symbols. The older pair of hikers and their tripod sighting. The list of missing hikers dating back to 1998 in a 20-mile radius, with tiny red flags next to the cases that had never found bone or clothing or closure. Officer Kim came into the room like a person who had been carrying a message down a long hallway and had not dropped it. "Detective," she said, "we pulled security footage from the bait shop by the pier on September 30th. You wanted tide checkers. This is the day before Sunshine went missing. A man with a ladder rack fills a gas can, buys resin, pays cash, then walks outside, and there's Evan Kearney talking to him like they know each other." "How do we know they're talking?" Carla asked, skepticism as shield. "Because the bait shop mic picked up enough to know that Evan asked him, 'Is the chamber tuned?' And the other guy said, 'She'll hear what she needs to hear.'" "Damn it," Mendoza said, but it came out like fatigue. They had not wanted that direction. They had wanted Crane to be the outsider, the lone wolf feeding on the sad and on the ocean. They did not want their witness to be a man who waved binoculars and said the word whales like it was a Sabbath. "Bring Evan in," he said. They did not bring Evan in. They tried. He did not answer his phone. His workshop calendar had him scheduled for a sound walk at Bodega Head that evening. His apartment in Sebastopol had a plant on the windowsill that explained why he traveled with a watering can every Saturday. The plant was damp and so he had watered it this morning. The landlady said he was nice and had helped her with a leaky pipe. He had a storage unit outside town that contained extra mic stands, extra tripods, extra coiled cable. All of it had the careful economy of a person who did not like to run out. At 6 they returned to the headland. The fog had dropped like a stage trick. Families had retreated to cars. A photographer with a scarf over her hair was taking silhouettes against a horizon that refused to admit there was anything to silhouette. The wind cut east. The echo chamber took at least half of every voice and kept it. Carla set 2 deputies to watch the lot. Officer Kim went with a park ranger to check the lower trail. Mendoza walked to the fence where they had lifted the plate and stared at the seam as if staring were a way to warm it. He was about to turn when he heard it. Not a voice, not quite. A chop. Not the front porch pipe scale, but the sound of metal touched in a sequence. He followed it without registering that he had followed it. He moved along the line where the vents would be if the earth were glass. The sound led him to a place where the headland sagged and the soil changed from a grit that had grass roots in it to a fine powder that had once been stone. A footprint, or a suggestion of weight, touched the edge of the powder. He put his boot next to it and the comparison made him feel like a clumsy animal. He was for a moment not thinking of Evan or Crane or even Sunshine, but of the way the land's breath had felt against his palm. Detective. The voice came from behind him and it was Evan, face pale in the fog, hands open. You shouldn't be alone here. Neither should you, he said without turning fully, because some dance moves we know are old ones. You know where the other hollow is? Evan nodded once. Yes. You had a conversation with a man at the bait shop, Mendoza said. I have conversations with a lot of men at a lot of shops, Evan said. We talk about whether like it's a god we could barter with. You asked him if the chamber was tuned. Evan took a breath. Do you have any idea what the coast does to a person who loves sound? It's like living next to a symphony you didn't buy tickets to. We tune things as a way to belong. I asked if the chamber would be good for a class. I didn't ask him if he was going to put a person into it. You know his name, Mendoza said. Evan didn't look at him then. He looked at the vent line. He called himself Crane. And you let him in, Carla said, arriving with the force of someone who had run the last 15 steps and hidden it. You took him on a walk and showed him where the pipes were. I showed a class, Evan said. Will you arrest the lighthouse because it showed the sea where to find the shore? We'll arrest the keeper, she said. He flinched. The fog had beads of water in it now, like ash that healed instead of dirted. I think he's down there, Evan said. I think he thinks tonight the fog is his friend. I think he brought someone to help him carry. Carry what? Carla asked. Not a person, Evan said, and the answer was so unexpected that it let in a second kind of fear. Equipment. I think he's stepping up. If the voice didn't do it clean on October 1st, he wants clean now. He will try to refine the lure and he will want to test it, and testing takes power. So he will bring a generator. And he will hide it where wind cannot tell us it is a generator. Which vent? Mendoza asked, and Evan pointed to a hummock, not the one with the chain-link fence but a lump a little to its left, where shrubs had grown tall enough and stubborn enough that a person could crouch unseen. Evan walked toward it like a person approaching a sleeping bear. He pulled the shrubs aside and there was a second plate, smaller, not original. It had been levered recently. The earth around its edges was a different color. There were fingerprints in the rust. There was a smell, fuel, and a warning. Back, Carla said, and he did. She called in the deputies and they formed incident the way they always did. Perimeter, light, loud voice, regulation, breath. It will save your life to do it the same way every time. It will sometimes save someone else's. They lifted the plate and the smell got louder, and below there was the gleam of steel and the small, ugly purr of a machine in idle. A cable had been run from the generator down into the conduit and out of sight. It was thicker than speaker wire. It was the thickness of something that wanted to be taken seriously. Shut it down, Mendoza said, and a deputy killed the switch. The silence was not silence. It was the noise of the sea sending a wave against the headland and of blood. Somewhere, as soft as ghost words, there was a sound like a voice. It said something that once in a tape had sounded like, don't follow. Now it sounded like, come here. 2 teams, Mendoza said. 1 through the shaft we know. 1 through this new vent. I'll take the shaft, Carla said, which was the kind of generosity she hid under sarcasm. I'll take the vent, he replied, and if I get stuck you can write all the reports you like. Evan stood with his hands holding nothing. He looked very much like a person who had not expected to be part of a police matter when he woke, and who had nevertheless rehearsed exactly this moment when he could not sleep. You're going to hear everything twice, he said. Once the way it is and once the way the headland wants it to be. If he's playing a sound, it will lag itself because of the pipes. If he's in there and he hears you, he'll be between you and his power. He thinks that makes him a god. Good, Mendoza said. I like small gods. They bleed like the rest of us. He went down the vent ladder with a carefulness that put a new respect into his knees. The conduit angled to meet the main shaft and made an elbow left. The generator had a cable tether, like a leash, which meant Crane was worried about losing it. Which meant he intended to leave it soon and come back for it. He moved with his light low, hands sweeping the air a half-second before his body, as if he could feel the world the way a blind man does. From the other side, the shaft side, he heard Carla's team checking in, voices steadied into radio language. He saw the point where someone had scraped resin onto low metal rungs. He saw the place where rope had burned a smudge into stone. Then he saw light. Not his. A steady, tempered white like a lantern with a diffuser. He killed his. He let his pupils swell. He let the smell of the ocean teach him the size of the room beyond. He slid forward and peered around the corner. Crane was not a monster. He was a man who had the kind of face that had learned not to be interesting. He kept his hair in a way that didn't claim a style. He wore a jacket that didn't care to be noticed. He knelt by the wall, which had a speaker the size of a dinner plate bolted to it. The speaker's face had been taped with a cone that funneled sound into one of the vents. He was adjusting the tape with the care of a person who likes his corners to be corners. Another man, shorter, shoulders like a habit, was fussing with a second cable. He looked like the kind of person who had been recruited not because he wanted it but because he needed the money and didn't know how to say no. Crane spoke to him in a voice that meant to be kind and had forgotten how. When the interval hits, raise volume, Crane said. If we time the swell, the echo carries it and fills the headland. No one will know where it comes from. We need the low band to ride the surf, not fight it. Won't the patrol hear? The other man asked, anxiety a metronome in his throat. They always hear, Crane said, but they don't know what they hear. Not until the fog makes them wrong. He tightened a bolt as if his fingers were instruments. Mendoza thought of Sunshine, of the way she had written Evan's name and a question mark. He thought of Evan above ground, a person who loved sound and had built a way for it to be used for harm. He thought of how the world did not bless or curse. It just gave you a set of tools and waited to see what you did. He moved his radio to whisper. On my mark, he said, push air to them. Make them think it's the sea. It was nonsense. He could not ask the planet to rearrange itself. But Carla heard something else in his voice. She lined her team at the shaft's other elbow and at his count, they kicked their boots against the conduit, a cascade of metallic thunder that came like a gust. Crane looked up. The other man flinched and grabbed the cable. The speaker's cone vibrated and the tape peeled an inch and hung like a tongue. Police. Mendoza shouted, light up, arm out, gun the punctuation to a sentence he did not want to have to say. Hands. Crane did not do the thing where a man runs at a cop with a cable as if it were a snake. He raised his hands and smiled with a sadness that had no apology in it. He looked like a music teacher who had been told he would never have a student again. The other man sobbed once, a sound like a squeeze box. Carla's team flowed in from the other side and made the room small. They cuffed Crane and the assistant and read them the words. Crane's smile never left his mouth. He did not lick his lips. He did not curse. He looked at the speaker as if he were leaving a dog on a porch. Careful, he said to Officer Kim, that tape, if you pull it wrong the cone tears. You care about cones like you care about people? She asked, and he tilted his head like a person who had been required to answer diagnostic questions for court. I care about systems, he said. And people are systems, detective. They take inputs. They got them up the ladder and out into the night where the fog made their lamps halos. A small group of curious visitors had collected at the police tape and tried not to take pictures. Evan stood just outside it, hands in his jacket, watching with a face that had made a decision and was not going to unmake it. When Crane saw him, something like surprise finally made it into his eyes. I thought you'd stay out of this, Crane said. I was always in it, Evan replied quietly. I just didn't know what it was. You love sound, Crane said with a tenderness that was obscene. You gave me the coast. I gave 12 people the coast, Evan said. You took a woman. Crane's mouth made the shape of her name without pronouncing it. She wouldn't listen to the instruction, he said. She kept coming. I learned something about people that day. How to make them stop. It was useful. The assistant, who had a name and a mother, began to weep. The sound was bright in the fog. A deputy walked him toward a cruiser with a hand on his head to keep him from hitting the frame. Where is she? Carla asked. She did not make it a plea, she made it a math problem. If you want to perform, you need a stage. If you took a life, there is a place for that too. Tell us the place. Crane looked past them at the ocean. The coast keeps what it wants, he said. I make it want. Where? She said again. He stared at the vent hump. There's another chamber, he said softly finally, like a man confessing to an instrument and not to law. Beneath the echo. It undercuts. That's where the 3.2 interval comes from. I wanted it to be an amphitheater. It was a trap. Mendoza's radio barked then, and it was Officer Kim's voice, but it was not coming from the conduit. It was coming from the lower trail where she had gone with the ranger. The words were clipped and wrong in that specific way that says adrenaline is a metronome. Detective, check channel 3, there's, and then static. He switched. Carla switched. Evan looked at their faces and did the thing we do when we are not sworn and yet are drafted. He began to run. They followed the trail of light toward the lower path toward the echo chamber. The fog was thicker there and the sound was a blanket. The mouth of the cave breathed a breath that tasted of something not ocean. They reached the lip and the ranger motioned them down with that small universal hand sign that says, come, but come like a person who wants to still exist. Inside, their lights found the wall where the ladder glyph had been scratched. It looked older now, as if each time a light hit it, it gained a decade. The cone tape on the speaker down in the conduit had not just held sound, it had coached it. The chamber bellowed. And then another sound cut it. A voice, a woman's, the shape of syllables like a song half remembered. Do you hear that? The ranger asked, even though asking such a thing is the same as admitting it is too late to pretend you don't. They all heard it. Help, the voice said. Not like a recording. Not from a pipe. Not from a speaker. From below. Mendoza looked at Carla and saw in her eyes a mirror of his own terror. That a month of search and the story they had written for themselves about being too late was about to be replaced with a different story about a month of living where no one could. Where is it? He asked, and the ranger pointed at a shadow line along the right wall where the stone hummed different. He got low and put his ear to it, and it was not a trick of the way rock moves sound. It was a voice in a space beyond this one, a voice that had said "don't follow" on a tape and was now saying help. He took a breath like a diver. He looked at Evan and at Carla and at the others, and he knew then that whatever Crane had been, he had not been alone in whatever came next. Get me a light, he said, a rope and a pry. There's a door here. It's not a door made of human things. It's made of wanting. But we're going to open it. He pressed his fingers into the seam and felt stone and then something softer and then the slightest give. The ocean hit the outer wall with the right kind of force, and in that fleeting 3.2-second interval before the chamber spoke again, the seam breathed back at him. Once, twice, like a living thing. From behind him, from the darkness where the conduit elbowed and the vent line fed the cave its false voices and its stolen air, another voice came, soft, amused, intimately close in the way only a person who had memorized how to move sound could be. Careful, detective, it said. Not everything you free wants to thank you. He turned his light toward the voice, toward the mouth of the conduit that should have been empty, because Crane was cuffed and the assistant was in a cruiser and the generator was cut and the plate was off and the vent had become a throat for what was right. But in the beam, for a half-second, was a figure with a tripod on one shoulder. No, not a tripod, something like it, and a coil of cable in the other hand, retreating not away from them but down, deeper into a passage none of their maps had bothered to admit existed. The woman's voice from beyond the seam said, a little louder now, please, and the cave made the word into something that could have been plea or command. Mendoza reached for the pry, pressed it into the seam, and felt the stone shift under his palms. And then the entire chamber shuddered as if the headland itself had slid a fraction of an inch toward the sea and decided not to tell anyone except those inside. The seam began to open. And the light from beyond it was not the color of lanterns or of day. It was the color of water lit from beneath. Then, from behind the opening, in the same voice that had once warned, "Don't follow," and had now asked for help, came three new words, slow and certain, spoken not to them but to whoever had just moved away into the deeper passage. Evan, don't go. The light spilling through the seam wasn't daylight. It shimmered the way water does when a flashlight plays through it, scattering tiny motes like dust in motion. Mendoza squinted against the brightness, hand shielding his eyes, heart beating in his throat. The voice, Sunshine's voice, had come clear as though the air between them had finally thinned. Evan, don't go. Evan froze halfway between the conduit and the chamber floor. His face, washed in pale blue glow, looked like a man seeing something he once dreamed and then forgot. She's alive, he said quietly, almost to himself. She's right there. Stay back, Mendoza warned, but Evan moved forward anyway, his shoes scraping rock. Carla grabbed his sleeve and hissed, "You take another step and I'll put you in cuffs beside Crane." He shook her off, eyes fixed on the seam as it widened another inch. The fog outside pushed through the crack, curling in threads. The glow trembled. From somewhere inside came the rhythmic drip of water and the hollow, low vibration that had haunted every tape in the case. Mendoza pressed his shoulder to the stone, driving the pry deeper until the gap opened enough for light to fall fully into the chamber. The wall pivoted slightly inward, revealing a narrow corridor sloping down. Air gusted out, cold, stale, metallic. The smell of trapped tide. They aimed their flashlights in. The beam caught a rusted ladder descending into blackness, the rungs slick with condensation. 30 feet down, water shimmered on the surface of a small flooded pocket, a hidden lower chamber beneath the cliffs. "Son of a," Carla muttered. "It's a well." "No," Evan whispered. "It's the chamber. The true one. Sunshine." Mendoza called, his voice echoing twice before fading into the wet hollow below. "Sunshine Borjas, if you can hear me, call back." The reply came faint but distinct. "Down here." Every muscle in his body tightened. He leaned closer. "You need to speak again, Sunshine. We're here." Her voice wavered, muffled by stone and water. "Light. I see your light." Evan turned toward Mendoza, eyes wide. "We have to go down. She's trapped." "Hold on," Carla snapped. "We don't know what's down there. That chamber could be unstable." "She's been there a month," Evan said, his voice cracking. "You really want to wait for a safety report?" Mendoza didn't answer right away. The logical part of him screamed protocol. Wait for rope, backup, mapping gear. But then came another sound, the creak of something shifting below, followed by a splash and Sunshine's voice again, weaker now. "Please. Hurry." He made the choice he'd regret and never unmake. "Lower the rope," he said. Evan was the first to volunteer. He clipped into the harness, grabbed the rope, and started down the ladder. Carla cursed under her breath but braced the line, her knuckles white. Mendoza followed next, light strapped to his chest, gun holstered but ready. The descent was slow, slippery. The air thickened, wet and heavy. When Mendoza's boots touched water, he realized the chamber wasn't flooded fully, only ankle deep, but the tide was moving in through unseen cracks. The light danced on the ceiling, catching shapes carved into the stone. Spirals, ladder marks, and faint scratchings of words half lost to time. "Sunshine?" he called again. The answer came from the left, behind a low arch. "Here," she said, and there she was, sitting against the rock wall, knees drawn to her chest, her hair matted, face pale as candle wax. But she was breathing. Evan splashed toward her, dropped to his knees beside her, hands trembling. "We found you. Oh my God, we found you." Sunshine looked at him, confused, as if the voice she'd heard in the fog didn't match the face now in front of her. "Evan? You told me not to follow." Mendoza's flashlight swept over the rest of the chamber. A small pack lay near her, half torn open. The walls around them were dotted with rusted metal discs. Old speakers embedded long ago, now corroded and quiet. Cables snaked into cracks that disappeared into darkness. He crouched beside her. "You're safe now. The man who hurt you, Crane, he's in custody." Her lips parted in disbelief. "Crane? He wasn't the one who brought me here." That stopped him cold. Carla, still up above near the rope line, heard it too. "Say that again," she called. Sunshine's voice steadied, though her eyes darted toward Evan. "It wasn't Crane. It was someone else." He said the chamber needed a true voice to answer the call. Evan went still. The light trembled in his shaking hand. Mendoza studied him carefully. "You know what she's talking about?" Evan's jaw tightened. "She's confused. She's been trapped. Dehydration, hypoxia." "Answer the question," Mendoza pressed. But Sunshine spoke over him. He said my voice had the right resonance. That the headland listened better to women. Evan stood abruptly, backing away. "No. She's delirious." Mendoza rose too, flashlight fixed on him. "Tell me, Evan, when Crane asked if the chamber was tuned, who taught him how to tune it?" Evan's silence said enough. The truth hung between them like a current in the water. Carla's voice echoed down the shaft. "Detective, the tide's climbing. You've got to get them out now." Sunshine struggled to her feet. "You don't understand," she said, clutching Mendoza's arm. "There's something below this. It's not just echoes. Moves." When he started the sound, the water pulled back, and then it came alive. "What do you mean alive?" Mendoza asked, but she was shaking her head, eyes unfocused. The water rippled around their ankles, subtle at first, then harder, a pulse. The low hum returned, vibrating through the rock. Above them, Carla shouted, "We're reading pressure shifts, get out now." "Evan, up first," Mendoza ordered. Evan didn't move. He was staring at the far wall, where the light shimmered over a massive shadow just beneath the surface. It rose, slow and deliberate, like a shape testing its form. Then came a sound, deep, resonant, almost human but too wide to be made by lungs. The chamber groaned. Water surged. Mendoza grabbed Sunshine, pushing her toward the ladder. "Go." She hesitated, eyes fixed on Evan. "You said it would stop if I sang." He looked stricken. "I thought it would calm it. I thought the frequency." The rest of his words drowned as the waves slammed into them, knocking him sideways into the rock. Mendoza hauled Sunshine up, forcing her onto the ladder. The water was chest-high now, swirling with debris and grit. "Evan!" Mendoza shouted. Evan surfaced near the far wall, coughing, blood on his temple. "It's not water," he shouted back. "It's sound." And then, before Mendoza could reach him, the light burst, every embedded speaker crackling alive, releasing a roar of layered voices, hundreds of them, men and women, blending into one impossible chord that made the stone quiver. Sunshine screamed. Mendoza's ears rang. Evan looked up, almost peaceful now, and whispered, "It's awake." The sound swallowed him. One moment he was there, the next only ripples remained where he had stood. Carla and two deputies leaned over the edge as Sunshine and Mendoza climbed out, soaked and shaking. "Where's Evan?" Carla demanded. Mendoza collapsed onto the rock, dragging off his helmet. "Gone," he managed. The chamber took him. The roar below died abruptly, leaving only the whistle of wind through the vents. The sea outside sounded ordinary again, waves and gulls and the indifferent heartbeat of tide. Sunshine wrapped herself in a blanket someone handed her, eyes glassy and far away. "Seal the vent," Carla said quietly. "I don't want a single hole left open on this cliff." By dawn, the area swarmed with responders. Divers, engineers, federal reps no one had called but who seemed to know the name Project Ladder before anyone mentioned it aloud. Crane, from his cell, refused to speak. Sunshine was taken to the hospital. Mendoza stood alone near the Overlook, watching the fog burn away from the rocks. Carla approached, holding a small evidence bag. Inside was a cassette, muddy, dented, but legibly labeled in Sunshine's handwriting, October 31st, last recording. "Found it floating in the runoff near the lower trail," she said. "Probably washed out when the water rose." He took it, turned it over in his hand. "Have you listened yet?" She shook her head. "Thought you should." They went to the cruiser, inserted the tape into the old dashboard player. Static filled the car. Then came Sunshine's voice, clearer than any recording they'd heard before. "If anyone finds this, I want the truth known." The voice wasn't calling people, it was answering. "Someone made the headland speak, but something under it has been listening longer than we've been alive. It used our echoes to build its own." The sound in the background wasn't waves now, it was breathing. Slow, immense, rhythmic. Then a faint second voice, soft and male, layered beneath hers. "Evan, it's not done." The tape clicked off. Mendoza stared through the windshield at the sea, now bright and deceptively calm. "He's right," he said quietly. Carla frowned. "What do you mean?" He nodded toward the Overlook. Below, far out near the surf line, the water was rippling in a steady 3.2-second rhythm, just like the echo interval that started it all. The ocean, it seemed, was still keeping time. And somewhere under that rhythm, faint but rising, was a voice humming back.